Servus, Freunde. My name is Jimmy Cage and... What?
Sorry, sir. Can you tell me where I am?
What are you talking about, Buddymeister? You've been coming here for years and you don't know your surroundings?
Jimmy, it's you. Thank God. I'm totally lost without my sight.
I might have something that can help to make you feel better. Let me see. Maybe... give me here. Here. Eat this fruit.
Quite delicious. Jimmy! Jimmy! What is happening? I think I can see!
Damn it. Wrong fruit. Servus, Freunde. My name is Jimmy Cage.
And I'm Deniz, the Buddymeister.
For today's review, we forced ourselves to watch a disastrous copy of a 150-minute long Malayalam movie that once again reminded us of how bad things are when it comes to the conservation and restoration of older Indian movies. And by older, we mean almost everything that's older than 20 years.
It kind of depends on the industry. It certainly cannot be generalized. Hindi classics are probably easier to find than Malayalam or Telugu classics, for example. But in most cases, it's really terrible how difficult it is to get a hold of Indian movies from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s that have a halfway decent quality. Sure, you can find some of the all-time classics and blockbusters if you look really hard, and if you did get a good release, but almost everything besides that is only available in a miserable quality.
Yes, and it's even worse when it applies to movies that were groundbreaking in any kind of way. For example, the first Malayalam movie to ever be selected by India for the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film, Guru from 1997. It didn't get a nomination, but it's still a grand achievement to be chosen in the first place.
Guru is a Malayalam fantasy drama that was directed by Rajiv Anchal. It stars Mohanlal as Raghu, a free thinker turned extremist who, through meditation, experiences an altered state of consciousness that transports him into a world where everyone but him is blind.
Rajiv Anchal based a lot of Guru's story on H.G. Wells' short story The Country of the Blind from 1904. But a big part is also based on the teachings that Anchal learned from the spiritual leader Karunukara Guru.
Guru means a lot to a lot of people. Of course, there is a certain pride for the Malayalis because it was the first Malayalam movie to be selected by India for the Oscars. But it's also because Guru is regarded to be way ahead of its time.
And you can totally see that. I mean, the scope of this movie is epic. The production design, the art direction, the costumes, all of that is pretty amazing. And of course the idea behind this universal story, to tackle and discuss themes like religion, extremism, knowledge, rationality, through a parable like that is certainly ambitious.
Yes, no doubt, Guru is ambitious, but I think it's time for the 180 now.
But you don't do it.
I have to. I didn't like this movie.
Well, to be honest, me neither.
It starts very promising. We get this argument between Raghu and his father about how a Brahmin should live. We learn that Raghu is a free spirit who enjoys to be a tourist guide and doesn't believe in the caste system and the archaic and outdated traditions and restrictions that religion dictates.
Yes, but even before all of that, we get this small and very graphical prologue that shows us the devastating outcome of a mass riot. There are dead bodies and blood everywhere, and I was shocked and also impressed of the boldness to start the movie this way. And I was really anxious to see how we got to this terrible situation, because the movie then jumps into the past and introduces Mohanlal's character.
I think both of us thought the movie would slowly build to that first scene, but unfortunately the narration gets really sloppy really fast.
The narration jumps by leaps and bounds. We fly through Raghu Raman's character changes. After about 25 minutes, this free spirit is turned into an extremist who is ready to kill hundreds of people in a refugee camp. But as this mission fails, he comes ashore of another village where he encounters Vaidehi, who sends him into this mind-bending meditation where his beliefs turn around once more, slowly but surely.
Over 60 minutes have passed at that point, the point where the story finally is where it wants to be. That's a long time.
Yet at the same time, things have escalated so quickly and it was almost impossible to get on board with all of the sudden developments.
Exactly. The changes in Raghu Raman still seem to have happened swiftly, because they are only anchored by events that this movie strings together. So one of my biggest issues is that I don't really feel that I know that much about Raghu Raman, or anybody else for that matter. He comes across more as just a pawn who is pushed around by the script. So I don't really care much about anything that happens.
The gruesome and raw depiction of the riots and the blood-drinking guns that afflict the people are things that leave an impact, although the latter never really seemed to play a role after that, which is odd, but the editing and therefore the narrative are really sloppy. It's kind of obvious that the filmmakers wanted to jump through all those riots and this message of violence leads to violence to get to the Valley of the Blind, because that's where the real morale and message of the story unravel. And I have to agree with you, all the characters are merely sketches.
Maybe it's supposed to be like that. Maybe Guru has to be viewed as a huge parable, a huge metaphor on life and how humans always were the same and always will be the same. I get it, the Valley of the Blind is an allegory on mankind. The Ilama fruit probably represents religion and its seed represents the truth. And we also see Plato's allegory of the cave come to life. But it just feels so bloated, so blown up to epic proportions that this rather simple message that the movie conveys gets buried under the vision and under the runtime. You get what I mean?
I think so, but we still have to differentiate between what we as Westerners are used to watch and how this movie was perceived by an Indian audience. This was a new approach, a bold approach. And of course Guru tells a story that is timeless and probably even more relevant today than it was then. The line, "This valley has its own truth," sounds like the motto of our times.
Absolutely, and I don't want to take anything away from this movie. I can see the boldness trying to realize a story like that and also mostly succeeding in it on a visual level. But I would lie if I'd say that I've never seen a movie or a TV show that deals with the topics that Guru does before, and doing far better in that. Planet of the Apes or The Time Machine from 1960, for example. And you told me how much Guru reminded you of many Star Trek episodes.
Yes, Star Trek seems to be the prime example for comparison. Lots and lots of episodes deal with human nature, good versus evil, racism, religion, bigotry, and how we can and need to deal with all of that to become a better society. A society where all those things don't matter because they are man-made and stem from prejudices, old and dangerous traditions, and or people's greed for power. But in the best episodes of Star Trek or any other great sci-fi show or movie, characters and themes are usually explored with more focus and a smoother storytelling. I think a huge problem with Guru, besides its characters, is the way things are established or not established.
Things just happen. We don't know how the different tribes in the valley came into existence. We don't know why these people believe in the goddess of rocks, and we don't know why the scientist of the superior tribe is also a brilliant spy. Well, he just says it, so it's established. As I said, it kind of works if you look at all of this as a mere meditation, a parable, but that's what also makes a difference between a short story and a long movie.
Yeah, Wells' short story, which by the way has another outcome and tells a rather different story altogether, is embedded in this overarching narrative of Raghu Raman, so it's really hard to see this just as a parable. You can do it, but as a movie it just doesn't work that well. You're right, I also just can't help but feel as if a rather simple, important but simple message is crammed into all of this. And this might be nitpicky, but I also can't help myself when I say that I think it's tremendously dangerous when blind people use spears and bows and arrows.
Yeah, I think so too. I was also wondering, it was actually really driving me crazy, why these people were walking like they never walked in this environment before. Touching everything, stumbling, looking like they've lost their eyesight only a minute ago. I mean, they've been living in this place their whole life and they don't know where they are?
The idea of this alternative world is intriguing, but a lot of the execution came across as too unbelievable.
I don't want to be unfair, but sometimes I thought I'm watching Monty Python's Life of Brian.
Yeah, well, I think Guru lost us pretty early on, to be honest. I can see the appeal, and as we both said, the effort and boldness are definitely commendable, but it's bloated, it's too long, it kind of misses sight of what it wants to say, and wallows in its production design and maybe even Mohanlal's role as the savior.
I think we should wrap this up.
Alright, so what would we say in German about Guru?
Guru ist ein ambitionierter Film, der als Parabel auf das Menschsein, die Irreführung durch Fanatismus und das Wissen bzw. Unwissen von wenigen gesehen werden kann. Leider jedoch wird diese einfache und wichtige Moral unter der aufgeblasenen und schluderigen Umsetzung begraben.
I give Guru 6 out of 10. It's more like 5.6, but I don't do that.
For me, it's 5 out of 10. It's more like 5.4, but I don't do that either. Did you know that according to a Danish study from 2014, blind people have 4 times more nightmares than sighted people?
Why?
Well, apparently it's because blind people experience more threatening or dangerous situations during the day.
Okay, interesting. So, what are your thoughts about Guru? Leave a comment and hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and also on Patreon, simply at the Jimmy Cage.
And you can hit me up on Twitter at the Buddymeister.
You can also become a member of the channel and get exclusive rewards. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like. And make sure you hit that bell for all we have to tell.